Good evening, friends. Tonight, we'll step into the harsh, often bleak reality faced by medieval assassins, those unseen figures who crept quietly through the shadows, forever changing the world with a dagger's touch and a hushed word. In movies, they're mysterious and thrilling, but the truth is far from glamorous. Life as a medieval assassin was grim and filled with danger. Before we settle in, if you find comfort in these stories, I invite you to support this channel by liking and subscribing, but only if you truly feel at home here. I'd also love to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from tonight, and what's the hour where you are? It's always wonderful to know who's joining us and from where. Now, dim your lights, maybe let a gentle fan run for a bit of soothing background noise. Let's slowly immerse ourselves in this somber journey together. Let's start with the reality. Back in those days, no one woke up wishing to slip a knife between a noble's ribs in exchange for a few silver coins, all while hiding in a cold, cramped barrel for days. Choosing this path wasn't a dream or first choice. It was where people landed when everything had already unraveled. These weren't legendary loners with mystical training. Assassins were most often struggling villagers, shunned soldiers, once petty criminals, or simply people that society barely noticed, so obscure that their passing wouldn't make the records. If you had property, friends, or even just a goat to your name, you never considered assassination. You'd hire someone for the dirty work. But if you were just out of jail, had a knack for getting people out of difficult situations, and could slip past people without attracting attention, well, sooner or later, a stranger would quietly push a coin bag your way and utter someone's name. And that name was rarely an easy target. Not a quiet farmer, but a corrupt lord, a wealthy cleric, or perhaps someone flanked by guards and a ditch filled with water. The reward was tempting, but the risk meant only those who'd lost everything would consider it. There were no benefits, no retirement, no recognition. No one hung out a little sign reading "Quiet Services Provided." All you could do was stay silent, move quickly, and never reveal what you truly did, especially not in a crowded tavern. Best to say you sold rugs. Well, stains come with the business. So no child dreamed of becoming an assassin in those times. It was something you slipped into after life had worn you down. Your only companion the darkness and a dull, stolen blade. Not the hero nor the main villain, but a shadowy afterthought, a source of unease, who likely never got to spend the silver they risked everything for. Let's address another misconception. Medieval assassins didn't practice moves in hidden candlelit halls with gentle teachers and uplifting music. There were no wise elders or dramatic training sequences. If you learned, it was by surviving your first failed attempt. Most were not skilled professionals, but rather desperate people who knew how to move without much noise. Some had military backgrounds and could hold a knife. Most just hoped to land a blow and escape. Getting away, whole and unnoticed, took luck more than skill. No one gave you a manual or guided you through orientation. No safe meetings or helpful tips about body doubles or passageways. You figured things out by sneaking onto a window ledge and hoping you picked the right room. As for poison, it was a constant gamble. Sometimes you'd manage a feint. Other times, your target just grew wary, or worse, you'd drink it by mistake. No hotlines, no guaranteed cures, just trial, error, and a lot of luck. Maybe, just maybe, you'd pick up a few tricks from other thieves. Perhaps a lesson in quiet movement from someone older. But real mentoring was rare and never lasted, for assassins didn't retire. They disappeared. You carried what you could grab. A small knife stolen from a guard, maybe a length of strong twine, and anything else you could smuggle under your threadbare coat without it clattering in the dark. Success didn't come from lessons or gear, but from simply surviving. You learned by getting the job done, badly, quickly, and then melting into the night before anyone knew your face. That was your education, rough, fast, and concluded with bruises and the creeping sense that you were always alone. Why did anyone do it? Silver coins, cold and heavy in the hand. The promise of money drove people to these dangerous jobs, but truthfully, you were paid mostly in empty promises. When someone needed an assassin, they didn't want a long-term agreement or any evidence. Silver up front, more after, maybe. But after meant once they checked you didn't make mistakes, create trouble, or linger. Sometimes when the job was done, your employer vanished, or worse, tried to ensure you wouldn't talk, sending a knife your way instead of payment. And even if you did get your money, it was barely enough, certainly not enough to make up for hiding in itchy hay or the shame that came with your task. Some assignments weren't even real. Setups meant to lure you into a trap where guards waited and no one cared to hear your side of the story. Justice? Forget it. You couldn't exactly tell a judge you wanted to sue a noble for breaking an assassin's agreement. Your only trial was a public display you'd never walk away from. You learned to demand payment in advance and to trust absolutely no one, not even the scribe who swore your days of suffering were over, because more often than not, this work simply made those days even fewer. Let's talk about equipment. Forget fantasy tales and dazzling games. There were no hidden blades or magic weapons, just what you could steal, sharpen yourself, or stash in battered clothing. If luck was with you, you had a half-decent dagger. Not fancy, just sharp and free from rust, and hopefully not marked with the last person's blood. Poisons were real but wildly unpredictable, sourced from roots, stones, or perhaps frog parts. Some worked quickly or not at all. Sometimes they made your mark ill but left them alive, angrier, and now watching everyone more closely. You could strangle or climb with a rope if you remembered how to tie it. Bows could be effective if you knew how, but hard to hide, and often unnecessary. The most common assassinations were close, quiet, and often messy. If your weapon failed, you improvised. Grabbed whatever was near, even if it meant a roof tile or a jagged nail. Everything you carried needed to be hidden, often sewn inside your sleeve or tucked in your boot. There were no improvements or upgrades. You just hoped your tools wouldn't betray you mid-task. In the end, success wasn't about the weapon. It was about you, working alone and expected to perform wonders with almost nothing. Targets were never easy. No one paid for random crimes. Your marks were powerful. Lords, high-ranking clergy, soldiers of rank, and sometimes members of royalty. They were difficult to reach. First, their guards, dozens of them, alert and sometimes just bored enough to make trouble. You had to learn every watch route, every creaky board, and even which staircase caught out the tired man at midnight. Then there were the defenses, castles protected not by locked doors but by towering walls, deadly gaps, and ditches filled with creatures and traps. Getting in was only the beginning. Any mistake with staff, a sideways look, an unfamiliar step, and someone would whisper to the nearest guard, and soon everyone would watch you. The target themselves were always on edge, so many plots swirling around them. They didn't dine without tasters, didn't sleep without guards at the door. Even their beds were switched nightly. If you finally got close, you had just one chance, one quick, silent moment. Or you'd become an example, hung at the gates as a warning. The look of an assassin was nothing like the stories. No dramatic cloaks or custom disguises. Most often, you looked like you were just another traveler or down-on-their-luck worker, a person in tattered clothes, shuffling with discomfort and constantly fidgeting to hide a blade. Masks didn't help either. Most only made you look sick. If asked who you were, you'd have to make something up on the spot. Maybe a wandering friar, or a helper with odd jobs and silent prayers. Even if you fooled the staff, you had to keep your story straight for hours, always aware that being noticed was dangerous. No wigs or fancy costumes. Maybe you'd rub ash on your face, squint, and hope no one looked too closely. The truth was, your disguise only bought you a little time, enough to slip away or convince someone briefly that you belonged. You didn't work with others. No sturdy sidekick, clever chemist, or helpful handler. There were rumors of secret assassin guilds, but most meetings were inventions to amuse bored villagers. Isolation was safety. You trusted no one. Every contact was a risk. Even your client usually didn't know your real name. If they did, you immediately planned ways to vanish for good. Friendship wasn't possible. Friends asked about your wounds. Lovers tired of the constant fear and questions about where you hid the blade at night. One slip, one person remembering your face, could mean a race for your life. Even other outcasts avoided you. They feared the trouble you would bring, preferring to keep their own company and not risk sharing food with someone whose presence attracted fire and angry crowds. Sharing your burden brought no comfort. No one wanted to hear about the grief that followed you after each job. If you mentioned your work, people thought you mad or dangerous, and neither was entirely wrong. So, you learned to keep your pain, your bruises, and your secrets locked away. You sat quietly in dark corners, never drinking much, never staying long or sharing your name. Even then, it was probably never your true one. This was the real art of assassin work. Not fading into a crowd, but rather erasing yourself from every life you never had the chance to live. Let's say you took a job, planned your approach, bribed where needed, and disguised yourself as, perhaps, a worker cleaning chimneys. If you hesitated at the wrong time, your mark turned unexpectedly or was accompanied by their child, you could freeze. If your hand shook, that was often fatal. Failure didn't earn a warning or stern look. Instead, your fate was often monstrous. Horrific deaths on public display, with cruel tools and drawn-out pain. Missing your mark meant your target survived, quickly told everyone of the attempt, and suddenly you were transformed from invisible shadow to wanted criminal. Your face would be described and roughly sketched in every inn for miles. Those guards you dodged before now hunted you with purpose. Sometimes, you had more to fear from your employer than the target. A failed assassin was a threat, someone who might reveal their secrets. So the people who hired you would be the first to organize another attempt, this one aimed at you. There were no second tries, no apologies, no repeats. One moment, sometimes the only moment. If you failed, all you could hope for was a swift death before someone dragged out your secrets and, with them, your employer's name. The shame was ruinous, an invisible, personal humiliation. The job wasn't just to kill, it was to remain unseen, untraceable. To fail was to become a target yourself. Your reputation never mattered. In this line of work, you were only as safe as your success in your most recent job, and no one cared about the times you succeeded before. Now, say the plan worked. You struck swiftly, silent and unseen, and left a powerful figure lying still. There was no glory, no chance to linger or feel pride. Instead, you had to run, through back roads and alleys, blood on your footwear and a dog already sniffing where you stepped. There was no time to celebrate, no drink with friends, no relaxing chat with your employer. Your aim, from the moment the job was finished, was to leave everyone who might want to hunt you behind. Doors would close, city guards lock everything down, friends disappear, and escape routes vanish or become dangerous. You might be injured, forced to follow an exit plan you made weeks before, if you got that chance at all. If the person who hired you wanted to pay, you still wouldn't expect gratitude. They'd vanish as swiftly as you, seeing you now as a risk. You carried a few coins, a new target on your back, and the lingering knowledge that next week things would be even harder as you tried to settle and blend into a new city with a new name. Even when successful, the job meant running, never slowing down, always hiding. As if hardship wasn't bad enough, life as an assassin meant facing the suspicion and fear of everyone around you. In those times, people didn't just believe assassins were dangerous. They believed they were cursed, using dark magic or making unholy deals just to pass unseen. Stories went around that assassins could become invisible, change shape, or summon death with a whisper. People avoided your gaze. Mothers whispered warnings to children, and any odd herb or strange manner could quickly get you accused of witchcraft. Did being feared help? Not really. Mobs were swift to anger. They acted fast. One unexpected death, a bad cold, accident, or heart attack, and soon someone whispered maybe it was caused by a shadowy stranger. Suspicion fell on anyone unfamiliar. Staying too long in one place courted disaster. A bell, a group of angry townsfolk, and the cry of "witch" echoing through the streets. You had to stay always on the move. Even a strange coin or an odd accent could lead to accusations. Quiet, clever people were especially at risk. After all, anything mysterious might be dangerous, and dangerous things had to be destroyed. Now, let's focus on poison, that so-called elegant tool of the trade. In practice, using poison in the Middle Ages was unreliable, an art mixed with more guesswork than science. Your resources were wild roots, fungi, and maybe bits of minerals, sometimes animal parts. Mixing a dose strong enough to work but not so much as to poison yourself was guesswork. Measuring was never precise. Kitchens were busy, guarded, and filled with suspicious staff. Food for the wealthy was tested by several people, and sometimes even animals. Slipping poison into a bowl meant navigating not only the food but the gauntlet of eyes and safeguards set up around every meal. Even if you succeeded, the results varied wildly, sometimes fast, sometimes painfully slow, sometimes just enough to make your target sick but not dead, which only made them cautious and suspicious. If you were caught, the punishment was brutal. Long sessions with torture tools, blamed for everything from mysterious deaths to a sick dog. And even if you changed history, took out a tyrant, shattered a dynasty, or removed a dangerous rival, your deed was not rewarded with fame or gratitude. You remained an anonymous rumor, perhaps a stranger's name, or the quiet figure at the inn who never finished his drink. All achievements faded as quickly as you did, for your employer wanted silence, not stories. No monuments were built in your honor. Nobles erected statues of themselves, never the hand that removed a rival. Your name lived on, if at all, only as a warning, not as a legend. Your legacy was absence, fading away until no one remembered you'd ever been there. And above all, you could never trust anyone, not even the person who paid you. The employer was not your friend. The moment the job was done, you became a secret best forgotten. Sometimes you were set up, paid with betrayal, or replaced by someone else meant to silence you. The only sacred rule among assassins: never believe you are safe, even with those who need your skills most. Even if you survived all of it, the deaths, betrayals, and escapes, you didn't retire in comfort. There were no restful years by the sea, no golden coins in old age, no banners celebrating your successes. You faded into obscurity or were quietly eliminated. Too many secrets trailed you, too many names you had heard, too much blood on your hands. No one wanted a retired assassin. They wanted you gone, preferably forgotten. So you changed names again and again, lived in quiet hamlets, kept to yourself, and always watched the door nervously. Coins stashed under the floorboards were reminders, not rewards. too stained with memories to spend. Even in safety, you never truly rested. Every visitor, every unknown traveler on the road could recognize your face. Every dream was dangerous. Every laugh, too loud, could draw attention. You became more shadow than person, never able to love, relax, or completely trust anyone, not even yourself. There was no true ending, only slow fading, until finally, unnoticed, you vanished for good. By now, it's plain. The life of a medieval assassin was never romantic or noble, certainly not profitable. It was a lonely existence, filled with risk, suspicion, and the near certainty of betrayal and early death. Anyone who stepped into this life, thinking they would be powerful or revered, quickly learned the cold truth. You were always just one bad step away from disaster. Things rarely went as planned. The mark moved, the guards were restless, the helpful stable boy betrayed you for bread. All it took was a pause at the wrong moment, a blade aimed at the wrong man, or a face recalled by the wrong witness, and suddenly you were no longer unseen. You were the hunted. If you managed to survive the first disaster, all that followed was more mistrust, no companionship, and the knowledge that even triumph meant hiding under yet another false name. In the end, perhaps the only thing that awaited you was the quiet emptiness left when the world forgot you'd ever been there. Now, let's shift focus. Before she became the formidable queen known for her fierce reputation, Olympias was called Myrtale, a princess from the rocky hills of Epirus. Her people traced their lineage back to the mighty Achilles, and whether or not such hero blood truly flowed in her veins, one thing was clear. She was never meant for the background. Raised in the midst of ancient customs and rituals, Myrtale's life was shaped by prophecy, ecstatic rites, and deep reverence for the old gods. She wasn't content to simply smile and sew. Instead, she felt a calling toward omens and was drawn to the rituals of Dionysus, where women danced by moonlight and called out to the divine in wild, trance-like ceremonies. Her connection to higher powers was more than tradition. It was at the very heart of her being. Ancient accounts, likely penned by both awed and unsettled men, spoke of Myrtale keeping sacred snakes in her chamber, allowing them to curl beside her for protection and mystery. Whether this practice was real or just rumors meant to keep her feared, it became her legend. To her supporters, these stories made her holy. To her enemies, she grew even more intimidating. Her real influence began not amid soldiers or in court, but in the dim glow of torches, with priestesses at her side and serpents coiling at her feet. She was more than a royal daughter. She was seen as a living oracle, a woman shaped by something ancient and powerful. So when Philip II of Macedon, known for his sharp mind and bold ambitions, visited the island of Samothrace for sacred rites, he didn't just encounter a beautiful princess. He came face to face with an enigma he felt compelled to pursue. Their marriage was more than a mere alliance. It was the clash of prophecy and might. Omens surrounded them from the start, lightning in the sky on their wedding night, dreams of thunderbolts entering her womb, stories that would become legend. What's clear is that this union didn't just lead to the birth of a child. It brought Alexander the Great into the world, a son whom Olympias was determined to guide from his first moments. Her marriage to Philip II was never a peaceful fairy tale. From the outset, it was an uneasy blend of hopes and jealousies. Philip was known for his ambition and had many wives before and after Olympias. She was likely quite young, but far from innocent. She recognized in Philip both a partner and a rival for destiny. Macedon itself was a kingdom of restless hearts and hungry ambitions, where thrones changed hands as quickly as families shifted their loyalties. Olympias walked into this world with pride and purpose, refusing to shrink into the background. Philip, for all his talent, didn't believe in monogamy. He collected brides for politics and power. Olympias, however, was not content to accept this quietly. She kept her own following, cultivated powerful allies, and consulted oracles to guide her steps and perhaps even her husband's fate. The birth of Alexander was no simple event. Legends tell of dreams and signs, flames circling her infant without harm, or visions of lions sent from the gods. Whether anyone truly saw these signs, they all acted as though Alexander was destined for greatness. Yet even with their son at the center, rivalries deepened, especially after Philip married another young Macedonian noblewoman named Cleopatra Eurydice. This was not just a family dispute, but a political one. Should Cleopatra produce a son, local nobility would see him as a truer heir than Alexander. Olympias noticed these threats clearly. The court became a battlefield, and she wielded every omen and ritual she knew to secure her son's future. Myrtale was gone. Olympias stood in her place, unyielding, determined that no one would challenge Alexander's claim. As Alexander grew into a young man, the palace at Pella became even more fraught with tension. Olympias was not just protecting influence, she was fighting for her life and her child's future. She recognized that court was filled with snakes, but she knew better than anyone how to strike. Philip drifted further away, leaving home more often, taking counsel from other Macedonians and drinking deeper. The final insult came when he took Cleopatra Eurydice as wife, this local bride being supported by powerful family. At a feast, Cleopatra's uncle mocked Olympias and Alexander, questioning if Alexander was truly Philip's son, or the child of a god, as Olympias often claimed. Meant to provoke, Olympias seized the tale. If people wondered whether Alexander was touched by something divine, so much the better. Alexander stormed away from the feast. Olympias left for her homeland in Epirus. Yet her departure wasn't defeat. In her own land, she still wore a crown, built alliances, and observed as Philip's marriage added strain to the royal household. Then, a shocking event. Philip was murdered at his daughter's wedding, on the edge of launching a campaign against Persia. Rumors raced through the palace. Was it Philip's bodyguard, a conspiracy, Alexander himself, or even Olympias? No one could prove it. But all eyes turned to her. Soon after, Philip's new wife and their infant were found dead, some say by Olympias's own order. With Philip gone, Olympias acted with force. While others hesitated, she moved swiftly and without pity. Cleopatra Eurydice, the young Macedonian queen, was killed in a way meant to send a message. Some say she was forced to take her own life after her child was murdered before her eyes. All agree there was no mercy. Olympias believed that in royal families, kindness only invited danger. A child, however small, could become a future enemy, and Olympias now played only to win. With rivals erased, Alexander, still a teenager but already formed by study and experience, was named king. But it was Olympias who steered many of the powers behind the scene, threatening generals, soothing the skeptical, and quietly removing obstacles. Alexander sometimes disapproved of her harsh actions against former rivals, but he did not step in to stop it. Deep down, he understood what his mother had always taught, that power brings with it unavoidable tragedy, especially in a kingdom where bloodlines cause both hope and sorrow. As Queen Mother, Olympias did not fade away. She simply changed her methods, pulling strings from behind veils, always watching, always protecting her son's place. She sent sacred tokens, held ceremonies for his safety, consulted prophets, making sure that every step Alexander took, near and far, was blessed by the divine as well as by royal counsel. To Olympias, her son's battles against Persia weren't just about territory. They were destiny, foretold and watched over by the gods and by her own unshakable will. No rival, no matter how distant, would undo what she had built. As Alexander pushed east, lighting fires of conquest far beyond Macedon, Olympias remained at home, her title now Queen Mother, but her grip on power unwavering. The official regency was shared with a seasoned general, Antipater, but Olympias refused the background. She wrote constant letters, never simply affectionate, but filled with advice, warnings, even reprimands. Alexander read every word, for his mother was the only one who dared question him at every turn. She reminded him who his true friends were. She warned that not every ally could be trusted. She did not hide her misgivings about his fascination with foreign customs or the temptation to set himself beside the gods. Back in Macedon, her influence over the general Antipater created tension. She subtly undermined his authority, using rumor and her status among the elite. Her alliances spread across neighboring regions, and her words held weight everywhere they were repeated. Her letters to Alexander grew more urgent, telling him of Antipater's dangers and potential treacheries. Whether she truly feared loss of control or simply sought to protect what was hers, she compelled her son to act. Alexander, understanding the importance of Antipater's role while he fought abroad, hesitated. The gap between mother and general widened further. Olympias waited, knowing patience could be just as deadly as any blade. As Alexander's campaigns expanded over continents, Olympias watched the foundations of his empire crack. He trusted outsiders, drifted from his old ways, and sometimes forgot the rituals and people that shaped him. She believed his victories owed as much to her prayers and their history as to any army. If he ever strayed too far, Olympias knew exactly how to remind even a king who made him. When the news came, her son had died far away in Babylon. It shattered her world. Alexander, the storm sent by destiny and guided by her hand, was gone. The grand empire he had shaped began to dissolve overnight, with generals carving it up among themselves. Antipater still held sway in Greece, and he held little affection for his former queen. Worse, Olympias's daughter, Cleopatra, was being sought after for marriage, each contender hoping to lay claim to Alexander's lineage. Civil war was coming, not by chance, but as an inevitability. Olympias saw her only hope in Alexander's young son, born to Roxana, a foreign princess. This child was now the last living tie to Alexander's bloodline, and this made him both a target and a tool for survival. Standing with Roxana and the boy, Olympias prepared to fight for them. But the generals who once followed Alexander now saw no reason to serve his widow or mother. They had soldiers, ambitions, and old ambitions to settle. Olympias did not back down. She had outlasted traitors, kings, and danger. Now her enemy was Cassander, Antipater's son, cold, shrewd, and ruthless. Two powerful forces waited to collide, the determined mother seeking to defend a legacy, and a new ruler seeking to bury the old world. Even years after Alexander's passing, when the realm he won fell into civil strife, Olympias made her boldest move yet. She did not return to Macedon as a grieving parent. She marched back as a force of reckoning, one last time holding the fate of a kingdom in her hands. The ruling council had fractured, and Cassandra, son of her longtime rival, was swiftly gathering authority for himself. Roxana and the young Alexander were, in truth, held captive. Olympia realized what was coming. If she hesitated, her grandson could slip away from history, lost in the growing darkness. So she formed an alliance with Polyperchon, a respected old general whose claim to leadership still lingered. Olympia's return was not one of supplication, but of command. Backed by Polyperchon, she crossed the border into Macedon at the head of an army. The result was immediate. Cities welcomed her in, soldiers switched sides. Even those once counted among her foes paused, uncertain. Despite her years, Olympia's presence still sent tremors across the land. And so began her quest for retribution. Loyalists of Cassandra were rooted out, one after another. Eventually she took hold of Philip, Alexander's half-brother, a man manipulated and placed on the throne, powerless, and ordered that he be put to death. Some say his wife was brought before Olympia and given the choice to end her own life. When she would not, Olympia had her executed. All was done in the trappings of formality, yet behind the rituals was harshness and spectacle, as if Olympia herself were dispensing fate from the heavens. Her message could not have been clearer. Only the house of Alexander deserved to rule. All others, simply pretenders. For a short but bright moment, Olympia held the kingdom firmly. She revived the royal family's power. She delivered her vengeance. She showed Macedon what it meant for a woman with nothing left to lose to wield the crown. But power in those lands was fleeting, unpredictable as wildfire. Cassandra still waited, always calculating his next move. He returned, fiercer than ever, with soldiers to outnumber hers, greater wealth, and a heart grown even colder. Little by little, Olympia's supporters deserted, and Polyperchon saw his sway fade. Soon, Olympia was cut off, defiant, but alone in the fortress at Pydna as her adversaries crept ever closer. She had sparked revolt, but now the flames threatened her. Olympia, once dreaded throughout the ancient world, now found herself trapped within Pydna's walls, the same armies she had once commanded now encircling her. Yet she never pleaded. She did not abandon her dignity. For months, she endured the siege. Food dwindled, illness spread, friends were gone. Still, within those stone walls, the same poise and force remained. Olympia refused to be anything less than the mother of a legend. Cassandra hesitated. To kill her outright was rash. Even now she wore the myth of Alexander-like protective armor. So he offered a promise: surrender, and your life will be spared. But Olympia had heard such pledges before, and hunger, which once gnawed, now threatened all inside. The defense gave way. Her loyalists yielded, and at last, Olympia was surrendered. Cassandra did not perform the execution himself. Such an end, he thought, was too quick, too easy. Instead, he delivered her to those whose kin she had ordered slain. They pronounced the sentence. Yet, when the time came, none among her own countrymen dared swing the sword. Facing her, regal and unwavering, even in old age, they faltered. These were the people who once watched her ceremonies, whispered tales of her snakes, and adored her son as a god. In the end, Cassandra called for outsiders, strangers unburdened by the old stories. And with that, Olympia's life was ended, not with pomp nor mercy, but in quiet and final silence. Her death brought an end to the true rule of Alexander's line and snuffed out the last glow of the empire's divine promise. Yet, even as she left the world, Olympia's presence lingered, her legend unrelinquished. She died not on a throne, but friendless, unarmed, and executed by those she once led. But history remains unpredictable. It does not always hold dear those who pass in comfort. Sometimes it exalts those who are defiant to the end. Olympia was not destined for an obscure note in someone else's tale. In life, she wielded her role as mother and prophet, shaping the fate of kings. Without her, no myth of Alexander as a child of the gods would have grown so mighty. No purging of rivals, no lightning and lion stories paving the path for a boy to rule continents. Olympia did more than give life to an empire. She fought for its survival. Among the notorious rulers of old, Olympia remains unique. She did not ride into battle like Cleopatra or lead troops like Boudica. Her contests took place within chambers and shrines, not on open fields. Her tools were alliances, marriages, rituals, and a deep understanding of fear and faith. She convinced people, and maybe even herself, that Alexander was touched by the divine. To some, she was a schemer or sorceress, guilty of all the suspicions and more. Her world valued intelligence and shrewdness above all else, and she learned early that kindness was a risk queens could seldom take. Through the centuries, opinions conflicted, villain to some, visionary to others, but no one could ignore her. Her shadow haunted the legend of Alexander, always lurking at its edges. Perhaps that is where she belonged, not as a sorrowful parent in a greater narrative, but as the story's heart. The woman who walked with prophecy, rested among serpents, and outlasted heroes. Olympia's remains faded long ago, but her legend persists, in whispers of strong-willed queens and destiny shaped in blood. Everywhere history speaks of empires born of myth, her presence is felt, waiting in the dark. South of today's Heraklion, on a sunlit corner of Crete, there stands a ruin that feels almost too dreamlike to be real. Corridors curl in every direction. Chambers seem to fold in on themselves. Stairways stop abruptly. Even now, it's easy to lose your sense of place inside this site. This is Knossos, the center of Minoan civilization, and it has long inspired stories of the labyrinth and the Minotaur. But before folklore filled its halls, it was first and foremost a marvel of ancient design. Built around 1900 BCE and growing over many centuries, Knossos wasn't only a palace, it was like a small city under one roof. Nearly 150,000 square feet held hundreds of rooms, storerooms, shrines, workshops, and even what some call the earliest flushing toilets. It boasted running water, apartments stacked for families, and creative ways to cool and channel air. Modern archaeologists see a calculated confusion in its plan. Visitors from antiquity may have felt utterly bewitched. The man who brought these ruins their fame was Sir Arthur Evans, a British scholar working in the early 20th century. When Evans unearthed Knossos, he saw the source of the labyrinth stories. The place was bewildering to navigate. Bowls, drawn in brilliant colors, carved in stone, shaped in shiny gold, showed up everywhere. Bowls were sacred to the Minoans. So convinced was Evans of the myth, he named the people here for the legendary King Minos. Whether or not Minos existed, his legend is now forever entwined with these ancient stones. Yet no true maze has ever been discovered here. No underground prison, no monster. What we see is stranger, a palace built in nested wings and turns, meant to mislead. The deeper you explore, the blurrier the line between myth and reality becomes. Was the tale of the Minotaur born among these chambers? Or was the palace itself the legend's beast? Knossos seldom gives simple answers, but it does invite curiosity. Generations have heard the tale. A monster half bull, half human, sealed away in a maze so tangled none could escape. Only Theseus, the hero from Athens, found his way out after slaying the creature, guided by a ball of thread and the mind of Princess Ariadne. But what roots does this legend have? Why tell of a maze? The earliest versions begin with Minos, the king of Crete, extracting yearly tribute from Athens, 7 boys and 7 girls, to feed to the Minotaur, itself a child of punishment and pride. The Minotaur hidden below was a symbol, the wild side of kingship, the threat concealed beneath splendor. To outsiders, Crete was a place of both riches and shadow. The Minoans, masters of the sea, seemed both graceful and otherworldly. Their ceremonies, focusing on bulls, their art with unfamiliar deities, and palaces unlike anything seen in mainland Greece, made them mysterious to visitors. The bull, above all, held special meaning. Artworks show young men and women daringly leaping over charging animals, and altars display stylized horns. As legend grows, some wonder if the Minotaur was more than a monster, maybe a memory of Crete's dominance over Greek cities. The maze might stand for political traps rather than stone corridors. For some, it's psychological, a look at the mind, the Minotaur, our secret fears, and Theseus, the hopeful light. Still, the story and Knossos remain linked. No monster has emerged from its ruins, but maybe the monument itself held deeper mysteries, myth echoing history, or a truth that longed to become legend. Long before Athens built its marble wonders or Sparta became a name for discipline, Minoan civilization flourished. Their influence grew not through conquest, but through trading, art, and a remarkable grasp of building. Knossos was their heart, a palace that was also a cultural and economic center. From 2600 to 1400 BCE, residents of Crete established trading connections stretching to Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Levant, and far-off Spain. Their ships cut silent lines across the sea, carrying ceramics, spices, bronze, and luxury goods. Unlike later powers, the Minoans grew wealthy through relationships, not armies. The most surprising aspect of their culture is just how different it was from that of their Greek heirs. Their art celebrates the natural world, the beauty of animals and people alive in motion, never just scenes of battle. Frescoes depict joyful dances, leaping dolphins, athletic youths turning over bulls. Their goddesses, too, are distinct, strong, bare-chested, holding snakes, marking everything from protection to rebirth. At the heart of it all stood Knossos, not a fortress on a peak, but an intricate complex in a fertile plain without high defensive walls. Perhaps the island itself felt safe, or the Minoans projected such strength that no one dared attack. Their confidence was written in their architecture, layers of buildings, open courtyards, sophisticated plumbing, and above all, in their freedom from fear. Yet their deepest mysteries are locked away. Their script, known as Linear A, remains unreadable. We do not know what they called themselves, what they prayed for, or even the true function of the rooms within Knossos. Their story lingers not in written lines, but in ruined stones and art, and through their influence on those who came after. To step into Knossos is to travel through time, layered, tangled, yet beautiful. Its scale is breathtaking, but so too is its design. Each chamber leads to another, hallways twist and disappear, shafts of light pierce downwards, and stairs snake into shaded corners. There are no straight lines. It's not hard to imagine ancient arrivals whispering labyrinth. Knossos was more than just a seat of kings. It was alive, breathing with ritual and meaning. The complex contained over 1,000 rooms, some modest, some grand, all assembled around a vast courtyard where ceremonies or bull leaping might have been held. Up to 5 stories in places, the palace used the landscape's natural rise and fall along with clever terraces, making direction a challenge without guidance or perhaps a thread, like the one Theseus used. Amidst this intentional confusion is profound ingenuity. The Minoans invented ways to cool rooms and flush away rainwater, and featured toilets that worked long before they were common anywhere else. One mysterious area is the so-called throne room, named for its built-in stone seat, surrounded by benches and guarded by griffin images. Was it the seat of a high priest, a goddess, or a place for special judgments? No one knows for sure. Yet in every passageway, color tells a story. A dolphin gliding over a tub, women in detailed skirts, young athletes vaulting through the air. Their artistry wasn't mere decoration. It was an expression of the spirit within earth and sea. Deeper into the palace, confusion grows, as though some spaces were meant to disorient. Maybe this lies at the root of the labyrinth story, not as a dungeon for monsters, but as a home built to inspire awe and uncertainty. Here, there were no locked doors or fabled creatures, just a structure meant to provoke wonder, ritual, and respectful fear. Knossos was more than government and residence. It stood as a sacred center, a blending of myth, architecture, and worship. Unlike later Greek temples that towered, its spiritual spaces were folded into every part of the complex. Shrines tucked into corners, pillars rising like protective symbols, horns appearing atop altars. Everywhere, the bull motif reminded people of the animal's deep connection to worship and to the world around them. Minoans did not fear bulls, they honored them. The famous bull-leaping fresco may have been a sacred performance, perhaps an offering to the divine, a moment where chaos was mastered through courage and grace. In hidden storerooms, figurines of snake-wielding goddesses were found. Bare-breasted, arms raised, snakes entwined around them. These figures were not objects of submission, but powerful symbols of protection and renewal. To the Minoans, snakes represented transformation and mystery, beings tied both to the ground and to that which lies beneath. The spaces where these objects were discovered might have been personal or household shrines, calm places of reverence amidst the everyday bustle. Layer together the art, bull's horns, secret corners, and winding halls, and the whole site starts to feel like a sacred engine, a place built as much for spiritual connection as for daily life. There was no single temple at Knossos. The palace itself stood as a house of the gods, a place where boundaries between the regular and the wondrous simply faded away. For hundreds of years, Knossos stood as a center for wealth, invention, and culture. Then, something changed, quickly and profoundly. By about 1400 BCE, people abandoned the palace. Its paintings faded, and the civilization that once mastered the seas disappeared as quietly as it had thrived. The reasons are many. Nature, perhaps, intervened. Around 1600 BCE, the volcanic island now called Santorini erupted, blasting ash and water across the region. Waves and fallout may have destroyed key ports and fields, battered Crete's coast, and shifted the island's fortunes both in crops and in spirit. Knossos itself was not lost immediately, but the aftershocks may have set new troubles in motion. Others suggest war played a role. By 1450 BCE, rising mainland Greeks, the Mycenaeans, may have seized their opportunity. Ruins show that Knossos changed hands. The script shifted from Minoan Linear A to Mycenaean Linear B. The art became more martial. It's possible the newcomers arrived by force, or perhaps the old civilization simply crumbled, then was replaced. There is little evidence of mass violence. The silence of the ruins tells us that Knossos did not fall with a roar, but with a sigh. Routines ended, and nature slowly reclaimed the halls. When Homer later sang of Crete, Knossos was already a legend woven with monsters and kings. Maybe the real end was simply the passing of time, as all great creations fade beneath newer empires. But the palace's stones still remain, and the stories continue to echo. For millennia, Knossos slumbered under Crete's soil, its name forgotten, its legends twisted, its walls hidden amid olive trees. Until one day, a man set out to follow a story. That man, Sir Arthur Evans, did more than excavate the ruins. He reimagined them. In 1900, he bought the land above the site and began to dig. The discoveries overturned everything known about the ancient Aegean. Evans revealed not just fallen walls, but a marvel of brilliance. He felt certain that this was the palace of King Minos, and the source of the maze myth. The paintings, the horns, the plan so puzzling it felt deliberate. As an archaeologist and also a storyteller, Evans reshaped the site, naming it and its people after the old legends, restoring portions as he saw fit, sometimes in ways that others consider controversial. Today's Knossos is part ancient, part Edwardian vision. Yet it was Evans who revived the past, unveiling a Bronze Age society more mysterious, artistic, and far-reaching than anyone imagined. He found the still untranslated script Linear A, leaving more questions than answers about language, culture, and belief. Ultimately, Evans brought myth to life and challenged the world to search for the reality behind the stories. A palace that confounds, a people lost to time, and a legend more vibrant than any could have expected. Knossos had slept for 3,000 years. Evans made sure it awoke. Walking through Knossos, you move not just through architecture, but through a woven tapestry of images, patterns, carvings, colors. They greet you at every turn. The builders left no written explanations. Their writing, Linear A, is still a mystery, so we must read meaning in painted walls and shaped stones. What did they intend? Their art is unlike anything seen elsewhere in antiquity. There are no endless battles or processions of kings. Instead, life is celebrated. Dolphins leap, lilies bloom, birds soar, bulls charge. People are shown with elegance and joy, dancing, living in what sometimes feels like ritual. Even scenes of risk are graceful. The Minoans painted a world in harmony. The most enduring symbol is the double axe, or labrys, found everywhere, in shrines, on walls, even etched into stone. It may stand for worship or celestial cycles, perhaps linked to a powerful female deity. The very word labyrinth may come from this symbol, meaning not a maze, but a place of the double axe, a holy space more than a puzzle. Stylized horns mark the top of buildings and altars, perhaps designating sacred places. Paired with bull rituals, these suggest a world where the animal meant far more than sustenance or strength. It was the heart of worship and community. Some think the palace layout, too, was built to mirror the heavens or the turning of seasons. A carefully shaped journey through life and death. But with no deciphered texts, we move between theory and imagination. The people of Knossos left their messages not in words but in color and form. We hear their music, see their gestures, but the full story lies just out of reach, like a thread leading further into legend. Knossos, though ruined, still feels alive. As visitors wander the halls, as archaeologists sift through soil and writers dream up new tales, the myth breathes on. The Minotaur itself may only live in story, but the feeling of a living labyrinth remains very real. We do not know the names of Knossos' rulers. We do not know their laws or prayers, but we know they valued beauty, revered the natural world, and created a harmony between structure and spirit. They were among the first before the stones of the Parthenon or the power of Rome arose. Before even the ancient temples of the Hebrews or Persians, there stood Knossos, palace, city, temple, and tale. Maybe that is what a labyrinth truly is. Not a trap, but an ongoing story told through walls and corridors. The myth of the Minotaur sprang not from empty air, but from a place that filled people with awe, confusion, and reverence. Generations made it a legend. We made it an archaeological wonder. In truth, Knossos has always been both. Today we can map its halls, photograph its art, even rebuild its images. But the mystery remains, shimmering where truth meets story. Perhaps Knossos endures because it doesn't reveal every answer, but reminds us to feel as much as to understand. It is not just a spot on a map, but a question that deepens as we walk. And perhaps, like Theseus, we are always following a thread. In the ancient world, engineers faced the walls of their enemies with raw determination. The earliest battering rams were simple. Teams of soldiers gripped long wooden beams, driving them into gates and walls with force and repetition. Then, as ideas evolved, the ram was placed inside a wheeled shelter for protection, covering operators from arrows and boiling liquids. The once basic log became a weapon of fear. The Assyrians, known for mastering siege warfare, made rams into tools of intimidation. Their siege towers combined battering power with archers, allowing them to break gates while defenders dodged arrows from above. Rock carvings from their capital, Nineveh, show these rams, tipped with iron, moving toward city gates and weak spots alike. To the towns within, the message was clear: surrender, or watch your defenses crumble under relentless force. The Greeks next improved the design, and the Romans perfected it. Roman rams, some named Ares, hung from chains in immense protective shelters and required dozens of men to move. The pounding sound, echoing against stone, was a sign of doom. Still, using these weapons was no simple matter. Operators had to stay in rhythm and protect their machines from heat, flying stones, and all kinds of dangerous tricks from above. Though blunt, the battering ram opened the way for smarter inventions. Enter the catapult, an early form of artillery that changed how battles were fought. Catapults hurled stones and terror from a distance, breaking the old rules of war. Greek inventors first created these in the 4th century BCE, striving to push the range and power of their weapons. In Syracuse, a bold ruler named Dionysius wanted the most advanced weapons, so his engineers designed catapults that could store great amounts of energy using twisted cords of animal sinew or hair. When released, these machines fired stones, javelins, or fire across huge distances. There were two main kinds: the ballista, which launched giant bolts like an oversized crossbow, and stone throwers for heavy payloads. Later, the Romans added their own refinements, building portable catapults that could be taken apart for campaigning soldiers. Some could shoot heavy stones with terrifying force, smashing gates, walls, or the unlucky defenders behind them. Catapults were as much for shock as for destruction. Generals used them to send not only rocks but gruesome messages, sometimes hurling bodies to spread fear or even sickness. These devices could be rendered useless if the ground was too rough, but on the right field, they could force cities to their knees. Now, not only did walls need to withstand rams, but they also had to bear the assault from above. Then the trebuchet arrived, a towering machine that became the centerpiece of medieval sieges. When one of these behemoths appeared, it was a declaration that no wall would stand. Unlike earlier devices, trebuchets operated on the principle of gravity, a long arm with a sling launching stones, with a heavy weight providing the force. The arm was wound up, released, and the sling hurled its contents in a high arc, reaching targets deep inside city defenses. The earliest versions may have begun in ancient China as manpower machines, but the counterweight trebuchet, which defined European and Middle Eastern sieges, arose in the 1100s, spreading rapidly as its power became legend. A well-made trebuchet could send stones weighing hundreds of pounds over vast distances, striking not just ramparts but inner courtyards or supply depots. The impact went beyond stone. Flaming oil, dead animals to spread disease, or even insults could be launched. Stories tell of a machine so large it inspired surrender before a shot was even fired. Slow to operate and demanding skilled builders, the trebuchet nonetheless became the most effective and awe-inspiring siege weapon of its era. While these machines battered and smashed from afar, siege towers brought the fight directly to the defenders. These giant rolling structures, a sort of moving fortress, carried troops and archers all the way to the top of the walls. Clad in wet hides to resist fire, They loomed over defenders and dropped bridges onto the ramparts above. The first siege towers may have come from ancient Assyria, but the Greeks and later Hellenistic armies expanded their scope, constructing huge towers bristling with weapons. The most famous tower, built by Demetrius at Rhodes, stood 9 stories tall, filled with catapults, covered in armor, and moved by whole squadrons. Even though some collapsed under their own weight, the ambition was unmistakable. Siege towers changed warfare by turning the struggle for the walls into a fight for height. Once attackers reached the top, chaos erupted. Still, these towers could be vulnerable, slow, heavy, and easy to trap or set ablaze if defenders were clever. Beneath the chaos, some of the most effective siege work happened out of sight. Tunneling was a silent, deadly tactic. Sappers would dig under enemy walls, propping up the structure with wood, then setting it alight. When the wood burned through, the ground collapsed and took the wall with it. Though dangerous and physically grueling, this could succeed where brute force failed. Defenders sometimes dug counter-tunnels, trying to catch attackers in the dark, their only warning the faint sound of enemy digging. These clashes underground were brief, suffocating, and terrifying. One notorious case at Rochester Castle in England saw attackers use pig fat to ignite a mine, collapsing an entire tower. Over time, siege engineers developed the skills of both demolition and geology, learning where to dig for maximum effect. When gates and walls resisted direct attack, sometimes it was the foundations that brought them down. Defenders, of course, had their own answers. Some, like Greek fire, became infamous. Developed in the Byzantine world, this blend of chemicals stuck and burned even on water, spreading panic among attacking ships and troops. Its formula was a closely guarded mystery, now lost, but its reputation endures. On land, defenders dropped boiling water, oil, or even hot sand onto those attacking below. Oil, in particular, stuck to skin and clothing, making it a dreaded weapon. Scalding sand flowed into armor gaps, burning men within. Simple things, gravity, stones, logs, or even decaying animals, were dropped, all designed to damage and delay. Hidden pits, trapdoors, and spiked barricades created a maze of pain for unwelcome guests. Delay was often the defenders' best hope. Every day the walls held was another day for the attackers to weaken, fall sick, or see their supplies run low. While attackers used physics and force, defenders used ingenuity and whatever they had on hand. Yet half the battle was psychological. Every thump of the ram or hiss of a flaming arrow struck fear as much as damage. Ancient armies paraded their engines to intimidate. Roman siege works were built in plain view, letting defenders watch as sneering machines prepared to tear down their walls. Sometimes, what was launched, whether flaming pots or severed heads, was meant to terrify as well as harm. When the vast counterweight of a trebuchet swung, or the silence before a catapult strike stretched on, it was not just stones but dread flying over the defenses. The goal was to convince defenders that resistance was hopeless, that the walls could not save them. And sometimes despair made the gates swing open before any final blow was landed. In time, the coming of gunpowder slowly pushed these ancient engines into the shadows. A single well-placed cannon shot could shatter stone walls in moments. By the 15th century, the castles that had stood tall for centuries crumbled under this new force. Still, the principles forged by ancient engineers did not fade. Modern artillery, with its calculations of tension and trajectory, echoes the same questions. How to strike what was meant to be safe? Even military ideas of overwhelming force and visible power stretch back to the days when siege towers and rams darkened the horizon. Traces of those old battles remain, in scarred hillsides, in the ruins of city walls, and in the design of even the oldest castles. Sieges now may involve screens, firewalls, and news blackouts, but the contest stays the same. Someone wants in. Someone wants to keep them out. The battering rams are history, the trebuchets stand in museums, yet the spirit of siege endures, just as destructive and alive as ever.